This episode is sponsored by my friend Tracy and my friend Emily, who are both sponsoring 2 episodes a month on the Life Shift podcast Patreon feed. Basically, that is a member support, and that's just helping to contribute to the production costs and anything that I need to keep the show going. As you know, I do all of this myself, and so sometimes I order software or hardware to make the show better than it is the day before. And so if you want to directly support the show, please reach out to me or go to patreon.com/the Life Shift podcast, and you can find out all the information there. Thank you so much for your support. And without further ado, here's the intro to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a saying in recovery programs and sort of elsewhere in life that when the pain of your current circumstances exceeds the potential pain of the unknown, you're going to go there. So I was afraid of giving up drinking. You got to remember, this is my coping mechanism. Drinking forever, for as long as I can remember. I didn't know, I couldn't imagine like going to a wedding without drinking. I couldn't imagine like camping without drinking. Like for me, and maybe a listener hears that and is like, well, that's ridiculous. But for somebody who's got this as like a steady part of their life and how I coped with like being in social situations, how I felt comfortable in my own skin, to take that away from me felt like, now what am I going to do? Like, this is the worst thing ever. But I think that what started to happen is that I felt so miserable that the miserable that I was feeling about myself was so overpowering that I was willing to risk the miserable of not knowing how to handle myself at a wedding or not knowing how to just socialize or God forbid, like deal with feeling like sort of a social outcast or anything, anything like that, with feeling anything. I have an aunt and uncle, I'm still super, super close to them, who had been sober for a really long time. And I called them and I said, I have a problem and I need help.
Today's guest is Meg Gluth Bohan. In this episode, Meg opens up about her upbringing in a small town, which was marked by scarcity and these societal expectations that she didn't quite fit into, in her opinion. And we really talk about how these early experiences shaped her into the person that she is today. We will explore her battle with anxiety and addiction and how she navigated the pressures of being this highly functioning alcoholic in both her personal and professional life. But Meg's story isn't just about sobriety, it's also about grief. She shares her journey through personal loss and the eventual path to self-discovery and fulfillment. Her insights into embracing authenticity and finding joy beyond these conventional success metrics really offer invaluable lessons for us all. There are multiple parts of Meg's story that I know will resonate with so many of you because it really is just about this human journey and how we can move through really hard moments and pick ourselves back up and really remind ourselves that everything is going to be okay. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Meg Gluth Bohan. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am sitting here with Meg. Hello, Meg.
Hi, Matt.
You are on the probably almost as far as you can go across the states from me right now.
I think so. I think that this, if I were to fly to you, I think it might be the longest intercontinental flight we can do.
So you're sitting in beautiful Seattle. Is it true that it's always kind of cloudy and rainy, or are there nice days?
That is not true at all. But
Okay.
if you're a jerk and you're looking to move here, then it's absolutely true.
It's terrible. Do not show up. No, we were just talking before recording. I have not been there yet. The closest I've been, I had a friend that lived in Vancouver, Washington. And so I'm making my way there.
You are.
Well, thank you for wanting to be a part of the Life Shift podcast. We were mentioning this before, but this journey I could never have imagined for myself 2.5 years ago when I started it, and really selfishly wanted to come on and kind of unpack my own baggage of my own life shift moment. And it turns out that someone like me I lost my mom when I was 8 and my life suddenly changed. My parents lived states apart. All these things were so different in my life. And 20 plus years of trying to grieve that journey was like a nightmare because I just didn't have the tools. And now, all these conversations that I get to have on the Life Shift podcast, a little portion of that kid in me gets healed in some way. And I just never could have imagined this journey. So, thank you for being a piece of that healing puzzle.
100%. Thanks for giving me the privilege.
I just love it. And I love hearing people's stories, even if they're hard stories, because I think there are, if we're lucky enough to get to a point of reflection, to be able to look back on these moments, there are some silver linings in even the hardest of moments and the things that we can learn and grow from. So I just so honored that you want to be able to do that with me. So before we jump into your story, maybe you can tell us a little bit about who Meg is in 2024.
Absolutely. Let me start with the easy part. Like, who am I on paper? Because the rest of it, I think, that's an ever evolving process. My name is Meg. I am the owner and CEO of Catalent Solutions, which is a manufacturing and raw materials distribution company headquartered out of Seattle, Washington. I have my headquarters here in Seattle. I love the Pacific Northwest and I love to be outside year round, so it bodes well for me. And I have a manufacturing facility in Chicago, so maybe a little bit less year round activity there. And I have a team of amazing people and an amazing business that spans the globe. Prior to doing this, I was a lawyer. So I am licensed in 3 states, and one of which is in the Midwest, where I went to college and law school, and had that little part of my story and part of my identity as well, which actually rolled really well into becoming a businesswoman. I think that, the pragmatism required of being an attorney has served me well, and I bring a little of that with me. I'm a mom. I have 2 daughters that I adore. And as noted, I like to be outside. I like to engage with the world around me. And most recently, have really been sort of interacting with the question of what do I do outside of business and personal? What do I do to sort of give back in the world and maybe move towards my fulfillment questions as much as I've moved towards those which are success questions.
Yeah, no, that resonates so much. I think that I've in my 40s now have been kind of navigating that, like what brings me joy, what are the things that really matter, and maybe during this global pandemic, I think a lot of people have kind of had this
Certainly.
resurgence of like, oh, am I doing this because I want to? Or am I doing this because at some point in my journey of growing up, society told me that I had to do this, this, and
That's
this
right.
to be successful? I call it a checklist life. Like I lived very much that. I think mine was a lot of trauma based. Losing a parent that young felt like abandonment. So I always felt like if I'm not perfect and hit all the marks, my dad is also going to leave, my grandmother, like, but I internalized that so much. And my whole life was like, get good grades, go to the best college, get a degree, get another degree, get a good job, get a promotion. And then at 40, I was like, oh, and it coincided with the pandemic. I turned 40 during the pandemic. So it was
Brilliant.
like, yeah, time to trying to lean into things that really matter these days. So it sounds like you're on that upswing as well,
100%.
finding the fulfillment. Do you still find that checkmark life important for you, or is it more just like a means to an end now? You have a successful going thing, you're going to keep that going.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get to a certain place in business, like you sort of can't quit until you really quit. Do you know what I mean? So, like, as long as I'm engaged in this and as long as I'm committed to this, and I am, because I'm still passionate about this and I still really enjoy like the daily engagement of my work, as long as I'm doing that, then I think that does come with a certain amount of like sort of checklisty kind of stuff. Like there are metrics to hit. There is a measure of what it is to have a successful going concern as a business. And I have to do that. And it's my responsibility to sort of lead us there and to strategize that and to vision that. It does feel less like work most of the time for me now. And I think part of that is maybe my age a little bit. I too crossed the 40-yard line a few years ago. And I mean, that's not, like, old by any stretch, and I'm not saying that, but I do think that if I look at how I thought about my life in my 20s and even my 30s, like, there is some amount of, like, settling down like you get your kind of jitters out maybe. And I think I look at this more now as like, okay, wouldn't it be cool if we built this? Wouldn't it be cool if we made this acquisition? Wouldn't it be cool if, and then did so in the context of a successful for-profit enterprise without feeling like I have this pressure to perform or prove myself that maybe I had when I was a little bit younger.
So maybe more risk taking with things like that? Or because before maybe they're more calculated risks, like I know there's an 80% chance that I'm going to be successful doing this, but maybe now it's like that would be fun to try.
Yeah, I think that there's the nature of the risk is a little different, right? Like I obviously I've shared I came from a legal background, so I had this way of being really measured and really methodical in risk. Now, I might say that my gut is something that I can lean on a little bit more and feel actually like that's its own legitimate thing. Like it's its own data point that I find absolutely paramount to any other.
Yeah. And this is I mean, we're not even into your story yet, but I'm wondering if having children also seeing them grow, seeing them make decisions and learn different things, does that inspire you in different ways too? Because as a 20-year-old, maybe you didn't have the same responsibilities or able to witness those kind of things.
Thank God. Like if there's a
Fair.
gratitude moment of my life, I'm like, thank God I wasn't a parent in my 20s. We'll get to that in my story, but yeah, I mean, I look at my kids now, like kids are so close to source still. I mean, my children are young. They're 5 and 7 and they're so close to what I call source, but like that origination point of just kind of going where the wind blows them a little bit and what feels right. And that can look a lot like impulsive emotion reaction and all that kind of stuff. But for me, like I'm like, oh, these kids like know what they feel. They know who they are. They know what makes them feel good. They know what they're about. They know what they crave. They don't have this garbage around they're supposed to want or what everybody in the room thinks of them. Like there's none of that shit going on in my kids, and it's really inspiring for me and kind of gives me a chance to look at the world that way through those eyes again.
I would imagine. And we all had it at one point, and then
Yes.
somewhere along the way, we kind of lost it. So maybe that's the perfect step into like painting a picture of your story before your life shift moment of like
Mhm.
where you lost that and how do you
Yeah.
find out again?
You know, there's all these cool little like memes and things like that that are like, do you remember when you lost your, your childhood naivete and all that? And I really don't. I've always felt sort of like an old soul. And part of that, I think I grew up in poverty. I grew up in a small town in rural Iowa. Cool place to be from. No disrespect there. I'm not throwing shade on anything, but we struggled and a lot of the people around us struggled. And so there was sort of this atmosphere of like scarcity and sort of never enough. And that maybe that it would never be possible, and so I remember just sort of the weight of that sort of being on me a lot, and that landed, and I feel like looking back on it, it landed on a lot of my peers. There was also a lack of what I'm going to call like proper coping mechanisms. A lot of people that I witnessed, and then I participated in this myself too. Like I didn't grow up in a culture, and this is no slam on my family. Actually, we were all part of a cultural system, sort of this really stoic Scandinavian breed of really not talking about how we felt or really identifying emotion, and people went to great lengths to cover that
I
up.
don't think that was just your cult. I mean, I feel like that was 80s,
I think so.
90s. Yeah, like
Yeah. I mean, I'm no expert of the generation, but I mean, we just no one talked about anything hard, you know? And if you did, you were like that weird kid. Um, and we
hey,
didn't have any of those. Yeah.
I was the kid with the dead mom. Like I wasn't allowed
Yeah,
to say anything. Yeah, so I totally understand. Like you just don't have the tools. Like nobody gave us those that permission slip.
not at all. But interestingly too, like a really generous of spirit culture too, right? Like when somebody died in my community, like the whole town showed up with like casseroles and, just like saturated fats and carbohydrates, and like it was really really interesting how that worked too. But one of the things about that, I always phrase this as saying like if you take the ACEs score, the adverse childhood experiences, I probably score pretty high on that. And and so what happened as I grew up is that I had this inner life of really like, what do I do with these emotions? What are emotions? What am I feeling? A lot of like turmoil, discomfort in my own skin. And that manifested as I got older with a lot of like anxiety, social or otherwise, a lot of being really unsure and not rooted at all in who I am and what am I about and I mean, if you can't say even like what you feel in a situation, it's really hard to then say who you are. And I definitely had a lot of that. And I found alcohol to be such a like wonderful soothing substance for
to kind
me,
of push things down.
for sure. Cuz while this is all happening, I'm also in the revelation and the realization that I'm gay in rural Iowa in 1990 whatever, like when I figured this out. And the culture is restrictive and I didn't know one person who was. Like like I this is absolutely like devastating for me. And so for me it was really important to cope and to have some outlet and alcohol became that. I graduated from high school and I went to college and I got kicked out of college like almost right away. Just partying, just being an irresponsible ass. You know what I mean? I'm just going to own it. Like I'd love to sit here and blame, whatever, but at the end of the day that's on me. You know what I mean? I couldn't cope and I didn't do well with that. And I eventually went back to college and then got into law school. And when I was in law school, I was halfway through my law school career when my partner, wife, marriage wasn't legal at that time, but we had a deeply committed relationship. Was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, and she died soon after I became a licensed attorney. And
It's pretty young.
I was young,
Yeah.
and so was she. And
And you
that
weren't prepared for that either,
no,
as
God
far
no.
as like emotions and those kind of things, right? Because you had just been pushing those down.
No, I didn't deal with anything that I had had the previous 20 some odd years. You know what I mean? So here I am in my late 20s and the only thing I know to do is to continue to drink. And so I look at this now and I'm like, well, that makes a ton of sense. Like that was a pretty obvious like 2 plus 2 equals 4. You did it before, that's how you're going to do it. So before some moment of transition looks a lot like somebody who's actually doing like really well, has a lot of potential. She's got an earnestly good heart, but a lot of stirred up garbage inside of her and not a lot of healthy outlet for that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it feels very, I mean, I'm sorry that you had to experience that loss. I know what losing my mother suddenly and then later in life losing my grandmother to cancer and watching that process. I know how devastating that drawn out process, even if it's a shorter drawn out process, just knowing that that's going to happen is so traumatic. And if we don't have the tools, like you probably didn't have the tools to process, it's overwhelming
It is.
because the only like I feel like there's this performative nature. Like we know how to be happy, we know how to be successful. We don't know how to do those other things. We don't
That's
know how
right.
to grieve. We don't know how to be sad. Maybe angry. We could probably play that one
Yeah.
because society thinks that those are the okay ones. But trying to mask those things can get really overwhelming. Did
Yes.
it escalate things, or did you just kind of stay on this steady path of like push those down, keep performing
Totally
after that
escalated.
moment?
Also
Oh,
perform.
really?
Like
Oh, okay.
if you want to like
Functioning.
I was the definition, picture perfect definition of a functioning, highly functioning alcoholic. Like, and here's the thing, that's what made it so hard for me to know that I had a problem. I didn't drink at work. I didn't drink before work. I didn't like I was so duty bound and so like rigid in obligation. And that's part of the reason that I was suffering too, right? Like I'm already trying to work off the sin of not marrying a man and being a farmer's wife here. You know what I mean? Like I had some acceleration behind that. And I just really wanted to do well. I also felt like even having been a lawyer at all was a gift given the fact that
Where you came from?
yeah, and how badly I had botched my earlier educational experiences. I mean, there was a certain amount of like guilt motivation. The problem for me is that I would lock that up and stuff it all in and perform and be highly effective. And then when when game time was over, I'd just lose it. Like, I would just fall apart into this addiction.
What did that look like? Just, I mean, I don't know. Like, if you're working till 7 o'clock, you're working on these cases, you're doing whatever, you go home. What does the in between time look like for someone that's highly functioning in that way, where you don't connect the dots, or maybe you did connect the dots, but you just suppress that connection?
It looks like a lot of binge drinking. I mean, every single weekend of my life looked, utterly ridiculous and frankly almost like not memorable. You know what I mean? For me. And you spend for me, it was like I'm getting up every Saturday morning wishing that Friday night never happened, making myself promises about what a better person I'm going to be, like all this kind of stuff, only to be drinking again by 11 at brunch and feeling like what's wrong with me? Why am I a person that has like no ability to manage this?
Because you
Sit,
were holding it together 12 hours of the
that's
day.
right.
Otherwise, yeah, that's exhausting
But
because you
is
were
it holding it together when you're pretending to you know what I mean? Like, I don't
It
know.
is. I would venture to say so. I mean, someone like had this addiction to grief, depression. I feel like this period of my 20s where I used my not being able to process the grief of losing my mom as like a crutch.
Yeah,
And it's exhausting because
it
you're
is.
holding it together for everyone else. So I can kind of, I think you are holding it together because you are performing. Everyone sees that you are successful. Everyone sees that you are meeting all the metrics and you're doing all the things. That's exhausting. So I can imagine you can't be a full person when you get home because you're just exhausted.
That's right. And I don't know if you have this experience or not, but grief reaches a point too where like you can't feel sad because that just burns and it sucks and all of the negative emotions around that. But also there's a guilt that comes with feeling happy. Like you truly are trapped at some point when you don't process and don't deal with grief. And I was
If you
certainly
don't
there.
know how to do it. Yeah.
That's right.
Now I tell people, like, if there's a sad moment, like, or you're in grief stage and you happen to laugh, that's okay too,
Right.
because you're human and like you're allowed to experience I just lost my dog recently, and
Oh, I'm
like
so
it hit
sorry.
me in ways that, I mean, I lost my mom. Like I thought like I could lost my best friend slash grandmother, like thought I could handle it. My dog, like,
Yeah.
and I had to give myself so much grace
Yeah.
in the if I was watching TV and I laughed about something, it's like, ugh, or if I just had to break down, And so I think you're right. There is this weird space of like, you feel like you have to be depressed, but not too sad, but you can't also be happy. So
Also, your depression and your sadness is a really good excuse. You can get some miles on those tires while you're failing to show up when you said you would, or when you're, acting a fool, or whatever it is, like whatever drunken antics I participated in, or whatever commitments I blew, or whatever bad friend I was, like whatever any of that was, I had this amazing excuse. My wife died. Like
and everyone else would give you that excuse too, because
100%.
they probably didn't have the tools on how to help you help yourself,
That's right.
because we're afraid of that, you know, walking up to someone and saying, "Hey, do you need something?
Yeah.
I'm here."
No one wants to talk about it. They're freaked out about it, and no one wants to bug you because it's almost like you're this sort of wobbly vase on a table. If they push you too hard, you might fall off and crack, and this is their problem then. And they don't want that.
We're trained to have solutions, though. It's just
We
like the
are.
example of, you said in your community, when people died, people would come over with casseroles and things like that, because that's something they can do. They
Yes.
don't want to like talk you through it. They just
No.
want to like bring you something so that you, I mean, it's great. It's nice. It's kind and all that, but it's just something like we as humans, we feel like I have to do something. So this is what I can do.
That's
And,
right. That's
I
right.
would imagine it's the same when you're facing someone that's deeply in grief, also suppressing feelings from growing up, but also dealing with an addiction that stems from that. You said there would be moments you would wake up on a Saturday and regret the night before, make promises to the world that you would change all these things. So somewhere in you, you knew that this was not the way that you should be processing things. True? Or,
Yes.
okay.
And I also knew that I'd lost control of it. Like, so there is a story that I would tell myself, and now I joke about it because I'm actually really open about this now. Like, I don't have any tolerance for shame, mine or anyone else's, on this. Like, I'm a human being having a human experience. But I used to tell myself that I was gonna go it's Friday night, the work week is done, I'm gonna go have 1 glass of wine. Matt, I've never had 1 glass of wine a day in my life. It's never happened. Never happened.
Depends how
Nobody
big the glass is.
That's right, and there's nobody who knew me that would ever participate in that theater either, like, who would think that's true? So that's a little lie. That's like the lie that starts the whole shebang for the weekend, or maybe it's a week-long vacation or whatever. But when you start lying to yourself like that, it corrodes you from the inside out. And everything I would say to myself after that, this is only 1 glass of wine, like everything after that was a lie too. And we wake up the next morning and you feel like complete shit. And you know that you were going to end up there because you always do. And you wanted to do differently. And you lied to yourself knowing you're lying. Like, I mean, like, even if you're not a person that like I didn't end up in jail. I didn't end up like none of these things, but like the degradation of my internal self-respect is no different than someone who did, which is why when people I know end up in jail, people I know from recovery and things like that, like I don't judge them because the difference between me and them is just a couple of circumstances. But the way we feel inside is exactly the same.
Yeah. How do you fight that or do you think that that daytime version of you is successful, happy, those things? Or are you kind of just, is that a lie to yourself as well? Because you're performing all day in this, I'm fine kind of mood. Do you lie to yourself that that's the good side and there's another side that's not, or in
No.
those moments?
Back then, I didn't see any separation, so I just felt like 100% of the time I'm a terrible person. Even if I had a great week at work, successful, winning a trial, whatever it is, like I could never be truly happy because I was always like, but you're, like, but you can't, you don't have any willpower. I mean, now I know this to be different. I know that again, I was a human having a human experience. I had some great moments and I had some bad moments, and none of those moments, good or bad, are 100% who I am. But at the time I didn't experience it that way. I felt like I had a lack of self-respect.
And that just grow. Does that grow? Does that
Yes.
snowball? Does that just,
Yes.
and then at what point does the snowball hit that wall, that metaphorical wall where it's like it's not rolling anymore? Is there a max out point? You said you never got in trouble, if you will, like legally, which I guess is good as a lawyer. But how does that progress to a point where, I mean, it seems like you feel differently these days.
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's a saying in recovery programs and sort of elsewhere in life that when the pain of your current circumstances exceeds the potential pain of the unknown, you're going to go there. So, I was afraid of giving up drinking. You got to remember, this is my coping mechanism.
Since you
Drinking
were a
forever.
teen.
Yeah, like for as long as I can remember. I didn't know I couldn't imagine, like, going to a wedding without drinking. I couldn't imagine, like, camping without drinking. Like, for me and maybe a listener hears that and is like, "Well, that's ridiculous." But for somebody who's got this as, like, a steady part of their life and how I coped with, like, being in social situations, how I felt comfortable in my own skin, to take that away from me felt like, "Now what am I gonna do?" Like, this is the worst thing ever. But I think that what started to happen is that I felt so miserable that the miserable that I was feeling about myself was so overpowering that I was willing to risk the miserable of not knowing how to handle myself at a wedding or not knowing how to socialize or God forbid like deal with feeling like sort
With
of
feeling.
a social outcast or anything, anything like
Yeah.
that with feeling anything. I have an aunt and uncle, I'm still super, super close to them, who had been sober for a really long time. And I called them and I said, I have a problem and I need help. And they were like, duh. Yeah. Like, they'd seen it. Like, I wasn't telling anybody anything they didn't know. And they really helped me. I had my last drink in October of 2011, and I haven't had one since. Relapse isn't part of my story, and thank God for that. Like, but they were instrumental in saying, like, we're going to show you how people do this, and we're going to walk with you as you do it. and they normalized the experience of just not being good at it. And that
Do you
was
feel
life-changing.
safe?
Yeah,
They
yeah,
made you feel like you weren't alone in this
that's
journey,
right.
and if there was a misstep, it would also be okay.
Yes.
I mean, but like you reached out for help, like that's huge. I would
Mhm.
say that that's a big like pat on the back, like you were ready to do that and reach out. What did that take a lot? Did you have any false starts or anything like that, or was that just one and done?
I feel like I probably had 100 false starts. Like, I had 100 times of telling myself I was gonna make that phone call, and I was gonna do that, and then it was like, "I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do
Was it
that
always
tomorrow."
them? Were they always the
It was
call?
always gonna be them. There are people in the world, and I guess this is a lesson I've learned and something now that, like, whatever else I do in my life, I wanna be one of these people. There are people in the world who, by their very energy, they emit a frequency of, "You can come to me however you are, whoever you are, and I'm gonna be with you in that. I'm not gonna judge you, and I'm not gonna get up on a high horse," and all this kind of stuff. And they just have always had that about them. So it was always gonna be them taking me, and also it had to be them. I needed to talk to somebody who had had the experience of doing what I was going to do. And when somebody's been where you are, you know that they know how to get out. You also know they're not gonna kick you while you're down laying there because 'cause they've been there. And so, yeah, it was always gonna be them.
Well, I mean, I don't want to say this sounds terrible, but how lucky are you to have people like that that were models
Yes.
of comfort and success in the journey that you wanted to take? I mean,
Yes.
and good for you for reaching out, because I think that's probably one of the harder parts of that journey is to
Yes.
just make that call and be like, I can't do it. I could graduate law school, I could win all these cases, I could be successful, but I need your help on this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need your help to become the full person that I want to
Mhm.
be, the person that can feel all the things, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. And when did you start feeling those good, bad, and indifferent, or allowing yourself or processing those? Was that like a scary part of that journey? Because I can imagine the addiction itself was probably hard enough.
It's interesting because I always describe, like, my journey through recovery as sort of like the same thing as any educational journey. Like, right away, you're at kindergarten. I just learned right away how to go through a weekend without getting drunk. Like, baby steps. How do you wake up? What do you do on Saturday if you're not at a bottomless mimosas brunch? Like, and
It
so,
was
or
your life.
that's right. What do you
Yeah.
do on Friday after work if you're not going to happy hour with everybody? Like, I didn't know. Matt, I had no idea what to do on a Friday night after work. Not a clue. And so, or if I was going to do it, it was going to involve alcohol. I loved hiking, I liked kayaking, but we were going to take booze along, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just, so it started like that. And then eventually you get these skills, and then you're working on the next one and the next one and the next one, and pretty soon you're in this graduate level program of learning the difference between physical sobriety and emotional sobriety, and what it is to sit with a feeling, to have a feeling come and dwell with you for a little bit and be present with you for a little bit, and you not make that mean anything other than, I'm sad, and just be with it until it leaves, and to really fully experience that. Like, now when I get sadness, I have time to look at, what is the texture of this sadness, what is this about? Like, I can be with that. I used to fear that so much I would do anything to avoid it. But we're talking about the better part of a decade or more to get to that place for me. Some people do it a lot faster, but I had to really work through that.
Is it because of your aunt and uncle that your journey was like, I don't want to say the word linear, but like curriculum based in the way that you kind of described this school? Or is that just your nature of like milestone kind of person? Because I would imagine there's that 12 steps. So I guess that's kind of like a curriculum, if you will.
Yeah.
But
It's both. So I'm naturally like your type A. I probably got a little OCD action going on here.
little
Yeah,
checklist.
yeah. So I tend to be a person that tries to move linear through things, and you and I both know that a lot of emotional process isn't at all linear. So that's its own head trip. But what was cool about the way they handled it, and then I did go to AA. I'm not particularly endorsing any. There's a million ways to get sober, and I think they're all valid. But what was
Got to
cool
find
about
what
that,
works for you.
that's right. What was cool about that for me is that it was like, you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. And I needed that because I'm telling you, I didn't know what to do after I got off work on Friday. Okay. And so it started like that. Then, as you become more comfortable, as I became more comfortable with like myself alone in a space, which was a shit show to get there, then I can freestyle it a little bit. Maybe it's not as linear. Maybe today I will tell you that, I've been present in this day to day, in this business day. Like, I've had some just things that have been really angering to me. Like, I'm not perfect. Like, I'm going to regress to you know, coping with my anger in a way that I'm not super proud of. But like the me today now will be like, oh, I recognized I'm off and it's time to get back on. You know what I mean? And I can go and I can handle that in a different way. Not linear, but like aware, if that makes sense.
Yeah, self-awareness is a hard thing on both sides. If you don't have it, it's really difficult. But when you do have it, it's also really difficult because you're like, oh God, what did I just do?
That's right.
Because I'm a human
Right.
and I'm going to make every mistake in the book, and but I'm going to learn from those moments. I'm thinking of your sobriety journey, and do you think that the recovery for you will always be more physical or emotional?
Emotional.
Was there any physical challenges that you had to go through with, I mean, if your body was being fueled by said
I don't know.
item for so long?
I remember, so alcohol is a poison. Okay. It's so interesting to me because like we live in a society where it's like a completely acceptable. It is the only drug that feels unacceptable if you're not doing it. Right. But if you look at the science surrounding alcohol, like actually it's really hard on your body. And even if you are not a person that's like in full, like they call them the DTs, like full physical withdrawal, like I didn't realize like how tired I was. When you drink a lot, your body doesn't rest. You don't get good sleep. I mean, most people will tell you that. If you drink tonight, you're not going to have the greatest night of sleep. Your body is working so hard overnight to filter that out. So tomorrow you feel kind of wrecked. Like I had months of just literally detoxing some of that from my system and feeling really like alcohol is a sugar. Turns out I really so then all of a sudden I was like wanting to eat carbs all the time. It's like all this weird stuff. Like there was a physiological like component to that. And the habitual physical side. Like you don't realize how comfortable you get picking something up and putting it to your mouth when you're sitting with
Like a
people.
smoker, I would imagine too.
Yes. And so there was just a lot of that that I didn't become aware of until I was no longer doing it, like where that came in. But the bulk of my life work here, like the consistent to be always sober, I don't miss drinking anymore. Like I don't think about it anymore. And in fact, the demands on my life and where I'm at professionally and the responsibilities I have, like I don't have that. I can't do that. I need to work out every day. I'm a daily meditator. Like I do a lot of things to feed the machine here to keep me at the performing the way I need to perform in my life and the way I want to. So I don't miss the alcohol. My God, I miss the escape. And the number of times that I will tell you to this day, 13 years past a drink, I just wish that I could have what it feels like to be after that like second glass of wine. I miss that, Matt. I'd be lying if I didn't say that. I loved that feeling.
What was that feeling for you?
For me, that feeling was like the absolute like sigh. It was a giant sigh. I just feel like so relaxed, and I joke now with people who knew me when I drank and people who have helped me, get sober, which is a huge team of angels. I always joke like, "Man, I'm just going to go for that one glass of wine." And we all joke, "Yeah, me too," whatever. But I'm chasing that feeling. I teach yoga now. I love teaching yoga. I love like the feeling that I get from that, but it's not as quick and instantaneous as pouring a glass of red wine.
It's a lot harder too.
It is. And so I miss that. I'd be lying if I didn't say that. But knowing that I miss that and knowing that I want that feeling of like, "Oh, man, I really need to relax," like, that's a skill I didn't have when I was a drinker.
Yeah, you were just chasing that feeling, not knowing why. And now you have the ability to recognize it and then find potential substitutes, if you will.
That's right.
Even though yoga will take you a while to get there.
Yeah,
It's a lot more work, and then you got to take a shower after, and it's a
that's
whole
right.
thing that goes along with it. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's really interesting from someone that has never had like a substance type addiction, but grief and bottling emotions will bring up all sorts of other addictions.
That's
You know,
right.
whether that's eating. I mean, I experienced disordered eating as a child because it was something I could control.
That's right.
You know, and I all sorts of terrible things that I probably should never say out loud.
Yeah,
But it's, you know, it's those things we're looking for that escape. We're
yeah,
looking for, or in some cases, it's the other side. Like it sounds like you were looking to mask feeling. And then sometimes when you're in that grief journey, I don't know if you had this when you were in your grief journey after you lost your wife, was this like seeking actual feeling.
yeah.
Like, am I numb? Am I anything? Do I exist? And so it's just really, I love that you say you're comfortable sharing this story and sharing how you feel and even admitting that you miss that feeling, because there are other people out there that also miss
Yes,
that feeling, that also are thinking, I can't say this out loud. People are going to think XYZ about me. And it's like, these are the stories that people need to be telling. These are the stories that you, growing up in rural Iowa, needed to hear, that people were going to get through these things. They were going to get through the challenges, they were going to move through poverty and into something successful. And then you could see that that was a possibility. And then you
yes.
wouldn't have pushed, you know, it's like, thank you for just being open with this story. Cause I know it's like not glamorous, right?
No, not at all. But here's the thing where I'm at in my life. Like I have a reasonable amount of success, and now then with that comes power, and there's a certain amount of like, so I have a duty to say that. I mean, I think we all do a little bit. Tell the truth. Tell the truth.
I
Tell
think
the
so.
truth.
To
Because
yourself too.
for sure. But like, you said something just a little bit ago, like all these things you'd never admit. Like the truth is, like
Well,
we all,
not on the podcast.
yeah, right. We all need to like understand. Like this is a timeless concept. Like I was raised in the church, right? And there's this verse in the book of Ecclesiastes, which is an old book. Like there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing that I'm dealing with that hasn't been dealt with by like a gazillion other people for millennia, right? Maybe their drug looked different. Maybe the way they made booze looked different. People have had sex addictions for millennia. People have had food addictions for millennia. People have lied and didn't know why. Like, I mean, all of whatever your big ugly is, whatever mine is, like somebody's done that. And I feel like we got to just tell the truth. Because it does two things. I feel like it frees me to say, this happened. I did this. I'm not proud of it, but like it frees me. And also the other side of that is it answers this like sacred obligation I have to free someone else. Because in my saying that, like then somebody hears that, then they're not alone either.
Right. It's a permission
It is.
to be truthful. I mean, you and I, we grew up in a time period in which people didn't, it was only the good things that we shared. It was only the successes, the promotions, the trophies, the this, that, or the other. And we were not conditioned, most of us were not conditioned to feel comfortable saying that, like, today sucked,
That's right.
and that's okay. And like, maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe it won't, but like, it's okay, because like you said, we're just like doing this human experiment
Yeah.
here of like, on this earth, we're just trying to like get through it. And to your point, probably the person next to you is feeling the same way
Don't you feel though a
about.
little bit like sometimes it's reminiscent? Like I try not to engage all that much with social media, but like don't you feel like we're on that path again? Where like why are you showing me the highlight reel of your life? Like we both know that's bullshit. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
I don't do it.
Yeah.
I tell people when I am a vulnerable hot mess.
Good.
And for me, I do it the same reason you say that we should just tell the truth, because there is someone out there that will come across that post and will go, me too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I've heard from people that say, I'm not ready to share this publicly, but your post made me feel this way.
Yeah. I love that.
And to your point, it frees us. It's out there in the world. Also, I don't know about if this is true for you, much scarier in my head than when I
100%.
put it to paper or told
Yes.
somebody.
Yes.
Then you don't have to run from it anymore. It's already out there. So you free yourself and you process it out loud. And the people that can handle that are around you, that are with, those are your people. And if they can't handle you at your most truthful,
That's right.
they're not ready.
That's right. It's beautiful that you're doing that because it's like that private message, like that's the good stuff. That person saying to you like you did something for me today, like that you can't beat that. That's life. That's it right there.
And I think, and I don't know if you do this, if you think back to the younger version of yourself and had you come across someone like you
Mhm.
now, or if I was this 10-year-old, couple years removed from losing his mom and thinking like, oh crap, I'm supposed to be happy all the time. I can't make mistakes. Am I gonna like make it through this? I'm pretending that everything's okay, but it's not. And I saw someone else out there, maybe that was a little bit older, that was successful and had a dead parent. Like
Yeah.
maybe I would have been like, oh, release the shame, like
Yeah.
it felt like it took me till I was like 30 something to realize that I was letting that 8-year-old
Yeah.
in me make all the decisions. And I was like so ashamed to try to go to therapy and then I'm like, now I'm telling everyone in the world, like, just find a therapist that works for you, that fits your mold. It took me 5 people to find the right one, like
Yeah.
interview them, find the right person and get that crap out of your head and out of your heart. It's
Exactly.
so messy. I love that I mean, thank you for telling this story. I know you have multiple life shifts in your life and whatnot, but this is so important for people to hear because addiction is something, it doesn't have to be alcohol. It doesn't have to be, it's just a mask, right?
I think we're all a little bit addicted. Like this is my theory. Like and then the question is just really like what are you aware that you're addicted to? Like but I think we're all and maybe your
Fair.
addiction fluctuates throughout life and maybe it's something different, but maybe you're addicted to your own victim story. Maybe you're addicted like whatever it is in any given day. Like
Ouch. You
no, I
hit
mean,
me.
like I've been there. Like again,
Yeah,
because
I
I got
was.
some miles on those tires. I got out of a lot of bad behavior with that. So that, you know,
It's very easy to
100%.
use it. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I say my grief journey was very much like I was super sad. And at one point I got really mad about it. And then I was like, oh, I can use this as an excuse. Like if something in a good way, like if something good happens, oh, it's because she died. If I do something wrong, then, well, I couldn't have been perfect because she died,
Right.
And it was like, but it is that once you get that self awareness enough, you're just like, oh, why did I? But you got to forgive it and move through it.
And then you look at it and go, how can I use this to help somebody else? Like,
Fair.
because again, that's like the one good addiction, I think. Like to be like, wow, it feels like I have a 5-year old and she said to me that she started kindergarten and it's a big deal to be a kindergartner because she's in a mixed age classroom, the kind of this learning setting, right? So she's the oldest. And I said, how was your day today, honey? And she's like, Mom, I'm tired. I was really busy. I'm a helper. And I was like, yeah, you are. Like, you're helping now. And she goes, I love helping people, though. It just feels so good. And she didn't say it because she wanted like accolades. She said it because she's 5 and that's how she felt. And I was like, oh my God, you're totally right. Like, be this way
And how do I
forever.
cultivate, right?
Yeah.
How do I cultivate this to like stay around? No, I love that. That's kids are, if they can stay kids forever, wouldn't that be nice? Or stay that feeling close to the source. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they're
Like
close to
that.
source.
I love that. Yeah, no, if you, I keep thinking of this like version of you that was so like on the outside successful from our eye, from a stranger's eyes, like she's winning her cases. She's a lawyer. She's accomplished so much. And then you close your door at night and you're not great. Do you look back and do you feel like a completely different person, or do you feel like a different version of yourself? Like, what does that reflection on that version of you look like in your head?
Intuitively, like I know that's still me, right? We're always a we're always
Right. Of course.
evolving thing, but I don't feel like I know her. Do you know what I mean? Like, and maybe that's its own thing. Like I'm not her anymore. We do get to change, Matt. We get to change and evolve and grow. And so I don't disrespect her and I don't disown her. I understand that she's part of me, but also that's not who I am anymore. And that's okay too.
Yeah. But also you got to make these intentional changes too,
Yes.
right? Like, I feel that must feel so rewarding in its own way. Like,
Yes.
when you do have accomplishments now, you're like, yeah, like I made this happen. It's not a crutch anymore. You don't have these other things, excuses. It's like, I did all this.
Yeah. And the
Not
same
to
is true with
brag.
my mistakes. I can own those too, and I don't have to I don't have to feel like that's like some death knell to my, my ability to succeed in life. Like, I can take both. That doesn't mean it's easy. That is not, I don't want to come here and sit and tell people like, oh man, I just, I hammer
Once you
through
stop
every day.
drinking, life's perfect. Yeah.
Not at all. Not at all.
Right.
I'm constantly learning how to do this. The skill I have today is that there is a shorter space between me falling off awareness and coming back on. And as that space lengthens, it's a check engine light for me to go, "Hey, how you doing with your daily practices? How are you doing with your, your being embodied and being aware of what's going on?" And it's not a derailing. It's just a like, "Hey, it's been busy. Why don't you come on back?" You know? And that doesn't have to be a flogging moment. It's just it's a thing. It's a thing to note and then to get back on.
This is a weird question, but do you have any friends that were your friends then that are still your friends now?
Very few. When you drink, your best friend is alcohol, and everybody else, sadly, is part of the cast and crew of that theater sometimes. And it is also true that alcoholics tend to hang out with other alcoholics, just a sort of pragmatic thing. So, a lot of the people that I hung out with then are still doing that. And I can't go do that with them anymore, Matt. A lot of the people that were friends with me then are friends with me now, but maybe we're in a different kind of friendship, right? Maybe it's more of an acquaintanceship. And then there are a few people that are just, it never mattered to them. They could ride in either place. But that number is, we can count those people on one hand, and I'm not using all the fingers.
Well, I can imagine that for some, this new version of you, this fully self aware version of you that's like taking life in your own hands and kind of like navigating this ship. Wow, that was a lot of metaphors. I can imagine that might be a lot for some people too.
Sure.
That knew the other version of you, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a lot harder to fully embrace someone that fully understands himself.
Yes.
And it's a good thing when you do, but it's a lot harder, right? Yeah. No, I love this for you. I love that you found this space and this self-awareness and just sharing this journey, because you said, like you said, someone could be listening now that might be on the precipice, might be in that snowball effect, might be picking up the phone and then putting it down. I don't think people do that anymore, but they're about to dial it on their cell phone and then they stop. Maybe they hear your story and they do call their aunt or uncle or whoever that is in their life and make that decision.
I hope so. I'm rooting for them.
Oh, and I'm rooting for the idea that we all just live in truth and like we start sharing more and just unburdening ourselves with the things that we probably don't need to hold on shame to or for.
Yes.
Now I'm thinking I like to kind of wrap these conversations up, and I'm wondering if this version of Meg could go back to the Meg that was in rural Iowa, pushing down, I'm never going to get out of this. I need to start drinking. And anything you would want to tell that younger version of you about this journey you're about to go on, or things to think about along this journey?
I would very simply say keep going. And somebody has patented the term, I think, but it really does get better.
It does.
Those are reassuring things to say to a kid. That's what I would say. Keep going, and it really does get better. Just trust me on that.
Yeah. And I see you.
Yeah.
I see you. You are worthy of all the things. It's interesting to think back. I don't know if you think this way as well. I think back, if this moment in my life didn't happen, I would not be the person that I am today, and the things that I know now and the people that I talk to, and have this weird gratefulness is the wrong word, but
Yeah.
gratefulness for the experiences that happened because of my trauma. Do you feel the same? Like this journey, this alcohol addiction and all these things were just part of getting you to this version of you?
Yeah. All of it. I'm grateful for all of it. I thank all the teachers in my life, even the ones that were hard to learn from. I'm tough as nails, Matt. I don't think that comes any other way. I'm grateful for that.
Can't be taught that.
No,
Life teaches you that. But you're tough as nails, but also feel very welcoming and soft in the right spaces too.
I hope so. I mean, listen, that's my life goal. Like, that is the true life goal. I talk about that energy coming off of my aunt and uncle. I met a bunch of people like them. That's who I want to be when I grow up, is somebody who can be with somebody, and the people in the room know that, hey, wherever you're at, that's okay. That's okay. Just be cool. We're going to be all right. Like, that's a that's what I aspire to do.
Well, I get that vibe from the long time that I've known you, this hour that we've had together. I do. No, you do put off that energy.
Thank you.
It's not anything you say. It's more the feeling that you provide. So, I too am grateful that you've had this journey because it's brought you to this version. It's, like I said earlier, kind of heals a certain part of me by sharing these conversations, the things that we should be doing with the people around us that we just kind of wave to and don't say anything to. It's
Yeah, for
like
sure.
so healing. So if people want to like get in your space, maybe learn more about you,
Yeah.
connect with you, tell you that, your story mattered to them and changed something, how can they find you? What's the best way?
Go through my website, www.megangluthbohan, all one word, .com, and start there. I I will tell you, like, if you send me a private message on LinkedIn, I'm just not going to read it. I get like a gazillion of those a day. But I do want to know you. I do want to hear who you are. So that's a great place to start. And I'm sure that'll be in your show notes too.
Yeah. We'll definitely have the link directly for them so they can find it and don't have to spell it out and do all those
Perfect.
things. So, yeah, please, if something that Meg said today resonated with you as you're listening, please reach out and through her website, however that works for her. I think she would love to hear that. And I think I can speak for both Meg and myself that if you know someone in your life that you think might like to hear this conversation, please share it with them. You never know what part of this conversation will hit someone else. So thank you for that. Thank you for just being open and willing to have this conversation, Meg.
Thank you for the same. This has been great.
Well, I appreciate you. I appreciate everyone listening. And I think I'm just going to close off and say I will be back next week with a brand new episode of the Life Shift podcast. Thanks again. For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.